Hi, everyone. So welcome to lesson 41. Today we're going to start talking about polar bears, polar bear populations. This is part of our unit called Think Like a Scientist. So again, for this unit, we are going to use what we know about climate change to help us understand how exactly climate change has affected different ecosystems. So we started out with the warm-up, which is on Google Classroom. It's actually a Jamboard. Your job is to put these blue words in these three empty boxes. Your job is then to move the words increases and decreases to go underneath the words at the top of each of these boxes. This is a cause and effect model, so please be careful to notice what thing causes another thing. So I'll give you a hint. The word increases should go right here underneath air temperature. After air temperature increases because of climate change, what happens? Right? So go ahead and take a try at that. After you take a look at that, the answers are on Google Classroom, so you can just go ahead and double check that you got it right. All right. So today's agenda, the first thing we did was the warm-up. After that, we did a quick introduction to polar bears. Third, we read polar bear email number 1. And lastly, we read the exit slip. So today's goals, by the end of the day, you're going to be able to evaluate changes in ecosystems due to climate change, which means you'll be able to tell me how exactly the polar bear's ecosystem has changed because of climate change. You'll also be able to analyze data for patterns. Today's focus question is, how has climate change impacted the stability of different ecosystems? So let's go ahead and let's get started. So there is an article that we read in class. This article gives us the scenario that we're looking at. So the scenario is this. You are a graduate student at a local university who is studying bears. Over the past year, you have visited a number of high schools to talk about your work and to encourage students to get involved in science. One day, a senior named Christy Martinez sends you an email. She's going to the Canadian Arctic, west of Hudson Bay, to study polar bears and wants to know if it's okay to contact you with any questions she might have. Although you're a bit jealous of Christy's opportunity, you've always wanted to see a polar bear in the wild, you're flattered that she wants your help. You look forward to getting her first email from the Arctic. So again, Christy is a high school student, and she has this really cool opportunity to go to Churchill, Manitoba, which is right here. It's about directly north of Minnesota. There she's going to study polar bears. But she's not an expert on polar bears, so she's going to send you some emails to kind of, to ask you about what you think about the things that she's observing and the data that she's collecting. So here's a zoomed in picture of Churchill, Manitoba. One thing you'll notice is that, well, two things you'll notice. First, there are no roads here. There are no roads on this map. Churchill is, it's pretty secluded. The second thing you'll notice is that it is right on the Hudson Bay. So it's right on this water. The Hudson Bay is all this water right here. So let's go ahead. Oops, I just realized you couldn't see my screen. So again, here is Churchill, Manitoba, directly north of Minnesota. And then here it is zoomed in a little bit. You can see there are no roads and it is right on the water. All right, so before we get into Christy's emails, we're gonna go ahead and read some polar bear facts. So the first fact is that polar bears live in Canada, the United States, like Alaska, Russia, Norway, and Greenland, which is technically part of Denmark. There are 20,000 to 25,000 bears worldwide. Polar bears eat mostly ringed seals, and to a lesser degree, bearded seals. The bears must hunt seals on or near sea ice because they can't catch them in open water. So polar bears stand on top of ice and they kind of like dive down into the water to catch seals. Next, Hudson Bay, which is figure 6.6, is covered by sea ice up to 8 months of the year. When the ice melts in July, Bears move onto land and survive on stored fat until early November. Near Churchill, Manitoba, polar bears give birth in maternity dens they have dug in frozen peat. The dens may be reused for several years. So the bears they dig their dens right into the frozen ground, and that's where they give birth. Next, most polar bears spend the winter hunting on the sea ice rather than hibernating in a den like grizzlies or black bears. In the summertime, females will sometimes rest in maternity dens to escape hot weather and biting insects. Lastly, polar bears are important to Inuit, who are the native people of the Canadian Arctic. One important thing to note is that the word Eskimo is considered derogatory, so it's almost like discriminatory, and it's no longer used in Canada. So the word that we use is Inuit, because that's the name of the native people. So Inuit hunters can get 500 to 1,000 Canadian dollars for the hide or for the fur of a polar bear. An average-sized polar bear yields 140 kilograms of edible meat that is distributed to the community as food for people and dogs. All right, so with all of that said, we are going to, you can watch that video on your own, we are going to read Christy's first email. So I will read it aloud for you. This email is called Arriving in Churchill. So, hi, I finally made it. There are no roads to Churchill, so I had to take a train from Winnipeg, Manitoba. I might look into flying back home because the train took more than 36 hours. The weather hasn't been very good so far. Even though it's August, it's only supposed to get to 12 degrees Celsius today and will cool off to 6 degrees tonight. It seems like we could use a little more global warming here. One thing to note, 12 degrees Celsius is about 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and 6 degrees Celsius is about, let's say, 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's not too cold. It's not as cold as you would expect, but it is August, so that is a little cold for the summer. Right? Christy continues, I expected the landscape to be flat, but I didn't expect it to be so wet. There are little streams, ponds, and puddles of water everywhere. There are hardly any trees. And the few I do see are all tiny. This morning I went to an orientation for new volunteers. We were taught a safe bear is a distant bear, and that we can't leave the station on foot unless someone in the group is carrying a gun. Apparently, the number of bear sightings around the station has increased. See the attached graph. I wanted to ask Doc, my new boss, about why this is happening, but we ran out of time. Can you help? The lunch bell is ringing, so I better go. Christy. So we're going to take a quick look at the graph that she gave us. So this graph has, okay, first thing we should do is look at the title. So the title is Trend in Number of Bears Handled by Wildlife Conservation Officers in Churchill, Manitoba. So wildlife conservation officers, those are people whose job it is to move polar bears if they get too close to where people live. So here we can see kind of how many polar bears they've had to capture and then re-release somewhere else when they get too close to where people live. So in 1984, the number was about 40, and we can see it pretty steadily increased until in 2003, the number is closer to 175. So that's strange. And we kind of know polar bears are coming closer and closer to where people live to get people's garbage, because there's not quite enough food for polar bears right now. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So you are going to answer some questions about the email we just read. So the Google form that you're going to open is called Lesson 41, Email Number 1 Reflection. At the top, you'll find a link to Christy's first email, and then you're going to find five questions. Oh, just kidding, 6 questions that you're going to answer. The questions are, number 1, Why do you think there are no permanent roads in and out of Churchill? That's that's like a prediction. So just tell me what you think the reason is. Number 2, why do you think the trees around Churchill are so small and few in number? And I'll give you a hint. The answers to questions 1 and 2 are related. Number 3, when Christie got to Churchill, the weather was a bit cool. In Lowell, it's common for August temperatures to be warmer than 20 degrees Celsius, whereas in Churchill it was like 11, quite cold. Christie jokingly comments about the need for climate change in Churchill. Would she be able to tell from just a few days that climate change is occurring near Churchill? Why or why not? Number 4, if climate change caused the Arctic to get warmer, that might seem like a good thing. After all, the Arctic is very cold. Why would that actually be a bad thing? Number 5, brainstorm some reasons for the increase in problem bears. Problem bears are polar bears that have become used to people, and so they're not afraid of them. And they can like threaten humans' lives or human property. So this is another prediction one. Just give me your best guess. Although I did kind of tell you the answer already. But last one is number 6. What, if anything, do you think the government of Churchill should do about problem bears? Why? Consider the potential loss of human property and or lives, cost to taxpayers, revenue from bear tourism, and the increasing worldwide interest in polar bears in your answer. So again, here's another prediction question. What do you think the government should do? All right, when you're done, go ahead and submit it. And then there's one last thing we're going to do today, which is the exit slip. So if you go on Google Classroom, you're going to find a post called Lesson 41 Exit Slip. The question is just another prediction question. The question is, how do you think polar bears will be affected by climate change? Please use your own words and ideas and avoid using Google. Just tell me what you think. All right? So that is all for class today. And let me know if you have any questions.